Hello, I'm Steve Goad with the OpenSea's Technology Innovation Hub at Old Dominion University. I'm a program coordinator. It's my pleasure to introduce Jerry Cronin, the Executive Director of OpenSeas. Go ahead, Jerry.
Thanks, Steve. Hi, everybody. As Steve said, I'm the Executive Director of the OpenSea's Technology Innovation Hub at Old Dominion University. Our job is to work with organizations, entrepreneurs, and innovators to look at solutions to problems, and in particular, look at how to commercialize those solutions, make sure they see the light of day, and all the good research and all the good things end up being something that provides value to the country. Today's session is being done for the Department of Energy's SBIR STTR program, and particularly the Water Power Technology Office and the Solar Energy Technology Office in support of their recent release of topics and announcements for the SBIR program. That said, what we're covering really applies to anything you're doing in the world of trying to get an innovation up and going and commercialized. So, agenda for today, these are the things we'll cover. First, as always, and what we always ask people we're working with, why is this important? Because if you're not solving a problem and it's not important, it's very low probability that you're going to end up with either an award or a business. We'll talk about types of value and types of impact, in particular the triple bottom line as an example. Different ways of going about proving value and impact and the concept of differential value. Talk about how to assign a value to a marketplace that you're going after. And then the last part of this deck, as always, we put in links and references to assistance and resources for helping you go forward. So this is meant to be an overview. It's not the be-all, end-all, but it's laying out the groundwork for things you should be thinking about. So why are we doing this with the Department of Energy? The SBIR and STTR program is really interested in making sure that what they're investing in with US taxpayers' dollars actually ends up getting going, ends up being commercialized, and ends up providing value to the world. So they're trying to avoid the SBIR program used as more just pure research, and then you go on to the next research topic and the next research topic. They're really increasing their emphasis on the requirement that what you do actually has a high probability of being commercialized and gets set up well on the way. And what we like to say, and what we get on our soapbox and rant all the time about, is to do this, you need to work the commercialization concepts into your project at the very beginning. So it's just not the tech. And I love tech. I'm a physics guy. I'm a computer science guy. I've played around tech for a long time. But on the parallel stream, you have to have commercialization going. Now, why is creating value important? And why is creating impact important? Well, to put it bluntly, if you can't show value when you're applying for these things, there's very low likelihood you're going to get an award. If there's no value and no impact, you probably can't create a business. And if there's no value and no impact, even if you end up somehow being able to create that business, high probability it's going to die on the vine because there's nothing to sustain it. There's no ongoing value. And a thing to remember, value and impact are not in your mind. They're in the minds of your customers and your stakeholders, the people who are going to pay for, the people who are going to adopt, the people who are going to use the solution to bring into the world. And I speak to this from personal experience. I had a startup in the environmental world a bunch of years ago, and we developed this expert system in the early days of expert systems to help in delineating wetlands, to decide what land was wetlands. Oh, we thought it was brilliant. It was using knowledge engineering, knowledge management, early type expert systems and things along those lines. 20,000 lines of code later, we launched it out to the world. Nobody wanted it, no pickup. We forgot to talk to customers. We thought it was just brilliant and everybody was going to want it. I want to help you guys avoid having those kind of scars. So let's talk about types of value and types of impact. Really, you can break it down into three areas. You're impacting economics, i.e. it's returning some sort of monetary value. You can be impacting the environment, Okay, so you're improving conditions out there, you're making something better, or maybe you're reducing impact. Say, for example, oh my gosh, instead of having to use rare metals and rare earths to produce a certain type of thing, you figure out a way of doing it with nitrogen and carbon or silicon, which are all over the planet, or something that might mitigate harm. Think carbon sequestration or filtering or those types of things. Or social impact, things that improve societal well-being. Maybe you're raising the economic well-being of your entire community, and also things along the lines of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay, are you involving more people? Is it more inclusive? Is it more just and equitable between the folks who live there? And this one's important because more and more of what's coming out of the federal government right now is specifically requiring that you address those things. So an important part of an SBIR submission, an important part of any other contract or work you're doing for the government, you're going to see that in there, and you have to answer those questions, in some case put together a plan. So you have to consider it. So some combination of these things has to create enough value in the minds of that customer that they're going to be willing to fund your solution, and they're going to be willing to sustain your solution. In the business world, there's a concept that's pretty popular right now called the triple bottom line. Basically, it's saying when firms are looking to do their operations, they're going to commit to not only having an economic impact, which is the things that, most of the time the shareholders are looking for, the return on money, the increase in revenues, the drops in cost, but it also has an impact on environmental issues and social issues. And you see in the second bullet point there, they shortened this to the 3 Ps. You're looking for profit, you're looking to help people, and you're looking to help the planet. And if you've been observing what's been going on in the business world and across the planet, this is becoming more and more important, particularly because it's changing some consumer behaviors. So what you're watching, for example, in the decarbonization of supply chains, Walmart and Target and other large folks are pushing that requirement down to their suppliers and down to their buying decisions, because their customers are coming to them and saying, hey, we want you to do stuff good for the planet, and we also want you to do good stuff for people. So we want to know where you're sourcing your labor. We want to know what conditions the workers are under. We want to know the effect on the carbon footprint for the planet. This is becoming more important. So you can't ignore it because it's a business imperative. It's going to affect your profits. So that's the triple bottom line. You might see it in places. I pulled these words from Kelsey Miller at Harvard Business School. They've got a bunch of good stuff online. I recommend you take a peek at it. Okay. Now, last week we talked about something called the value proposition canvas. And remember, the 2 things we pointed out why businesses fail to launch, why businesses fail to sustain and succeed and thrive. When you look at the information coming from the venture capital world, the angel capital world, it's not money that's causing these things to fail. The 2 major reasons for failure, and the number 1 major reason for failure, is improper market to product fit. Okay, what that's basically saying in a nutshell is you're bringing something out to the market that's not providing any value to the market. Remember, value is in the mind of the beholder. Okay, so we spoke about something called the business model canvas, and we spoke about this value proposition canvas. So I want to hit this a little bit more. Okay, on the right-hand side in that circle, that represents the customer segment or the client you're going to be selling things into. And remember the way this works. You look at the jobs the customers are doing, and then you're saying, okay, what are the pains associated with doing those jobs? Too expensive. It takes too long. The failure rate's too high, things along those lines. And you also look at things at what would be a wow factor. Boy, if somebody could figure out just how to substantially change this, instead of by 20%, maybe they change it by 95%. Some really, wow thing out there. Those are the customer segments. And on the left-hand side, that's your solution. That's what you're bringing to the market, which is some combination of products and services. So it might be software, but software never goes out there by itself. It needs to be implemented. It needs to be supported. It needs to be updated. maybe some sort of help desk. So there's a combination of products and services. And a product market fit is when you take the stuff on the left-hand side and you're able to map it back to the things on the right-hand side. So all those features that you have in your products and services, those features, they should help the customer do a job because the jobs are important to them. They should map to relieving some sorts of pains. And maybe, but not always, they map to creating some kind of aha or oh wow gains. Okay. And if they don't do that, there's no product market fit. And why this is important to you as you're developing your solutions is if you've got things on the left-hand side, features that don't map to things on the right-hand side, you're wasting time and money. You're putting in features, it's costing you development effort that are doing nothing to create value for the customer. And on the right-hand side, if those guys are looking at your particular solution you're bringing, and it's not scratching those itches or doing those jobs, it's not creating value. And remember, this values for a particular market segment. It's not the entire world. The entire world is not your customer. Your customers are very specific segments who cluster according to the workplace domain they're in, their views on the world, the types of things they're dealing with, so you can treat them as a group. Now, when we go back and we look at, again, those triple constraints, and we look at customer jobs are just not the technical and business process things that people need to do. Sometimes a customer job is, say, take Target. One of their jobs is to demonstrate to the consumer market that they are responsible environmental citizens. Okay, so that's a job just as much as making sure they can load up trucks at cross-docking facilities and ship them across country. So your solutions, as you're designing them, should hit those things, because if they do, they're adding more value to the pot. We also talked about something called the value thesis, which is basically, this is my solution. It helps this customer to make this happen better, and this is how it does it, and this is the value it creates. And I used an example of something we were doing at ODU with a program where we were looking at commercializing something for relieving or minimizing the amount of slipping and falling that occurs at different places. And you see our value thesis for that. The customer segment we were thinking of was continuous care retirement communities. And our solution was going to prevent, reduce, and mitigate falls by their members by doing the things you see listed there, basically a program, right? Reducing falls and liabilities. Okay, that's an economic thing, the liabilities, but also enabling that longer, higher quality of life, which is sort of a qualitative type thing. Now, the interesting thing about this one value proposition is we went out and we did customer discovery. We did some experiments and stuff like that and found out, market doesn't really work for that in these communities because most of the payments are coming through the Medicare system. And we couldn't figure out how to deliver the particular solution within the monetary constraints of the Medicare system. So the value prop was good, but it wasn't sufficient enough for us to build a business model out of it and make it actually work. So we pivoted. Now it's being rolled out and we're doing the experimentation with hospital systems who also have a kind of a dog in the hunt, because if, for example, if you fall or slip within 2 or 3 months after being released from a hospital, that gets recorded and put against the hospital's record. So they have a monetary interest in not having that happen. So when we're looking at those creating values in the mind of the customer. So the important thing is to go out there and do your discovery like we talked about last week. You need to talk to people. You need to validate, for example, it's why it's called a thesis, right? We're going to go out, we're going to ask ourselves, what don't we know? How do we prove it? Who do we talk to? That's your customer discovery. And it's a good thing to do up front so you avoid my problem of writing 20,000 lines of code that nobody wanted. The good thing was we changed the company and we ended up doing something different, and it did pretty well for about 9 or 10 years. Okay, so now we get to the question, how do you prove value and impact? Well, again, you're thinking of how you do it in all 3 of these areas. Probably the easier one to do is the economic one, right? Because there's a lot of numbers involved there. There are a lot of hard things to measure. Okay. So something to remember, I always, when I'm coaching people and dealing with people, is the differential value you create, i.e., the change from what they're doing right now to what's going to happen after they put in your solution and use your offering. That differential value is going to be what drives investment. It's going to drive customer adoption, and it's going to drive sustainability. If you're going out for funding, whether that funding be from the U.S. federal government, whether it be from a venture capital bunch of guys, whether you're self-funding, but you're also taking out a lien on your house or something like that, you want to make sure that there's differential value there. And remember, which is why you do discovery, differential value is solely in the mind of your customer. It doesn't matter what you think. You can have a hypothesis. That's totally fine. This is what I think is going to happen. But you got to go to the marketplace and actually align with what's going on. So we're going to talk about three different things. How do you go about determining differential value? The whole issue of, am I dealing with quantitative stuff, meaning hardcore measurement things, or some qualitative things where you're getting people's opinions and thoughts around things? And then some more about validating assumptions. So in determining differential value, for the particular thing you're submitting and you're coming out to the marketplace with, or you're going in for this SBIR, or you're going in for whatever, you might want to ask yourself, how am I going to create value across those three different domains? All right. The economic one, definitely. The social one, definitely. The environmental one, definitely. Particularly, again, if you're dealing with going after funding from the U.S. government or folks like that. They want to see those things. They need to be there. So what you want to do is you want to say, how do I model what's currently going on versus what's going to happen in the future? And you see those bullet points are the questions you ask and the things you're going to do. Is there already a framework for doing this? Okay. For example, the UN has a development framework that's used quite often out there. That triple constraint framework is there. There's plenty of frameworks. And if you can't find one, you might want to go and try to set one up logically for yourself. But you have to, you have to have some mechanism against which you can say, this is how I'm going to measure, this is what I'm going to measure, and this is how I'm going to calculate. So things like the Sustainable Development Goals out of the UN, or social return on investment is another one. Okay, the economic ones are pretty straightforward because that's business stuff. How do I increase revenue? Where am I cutting costs? How am I speeding up revenue? Those sorts of things. You're asking yourself, what are the important target issues? Okay, so what are the things you're going to concentrate on? There's probably 2 or 3 prime issues in anything you're looking at. What are the metrics? How are they measured? All right. And then how is that measurement obtained? I mean, it's all well and good to say, hey, this is what's going to happen. But if I've got no way of getting that data, I really have no way of proving it. Okay, so I can't determine or I can't prove that differential value. You need to ask yourself, how will your solution create the change? So specifically being able to answer, if I'm changing this factor, this is specifically how my solution changes that factor. All right. And then the last question, which is actually one of my favorites, because a lot of the companies we deal with don't only deal with us, they deal with other folks too. All right. So how much of that change can you really attribute to your solution? How do you isolate stuff? If you're coming out of the pandemic, for example, and you're saying, well, we're going to increase somebody's sales by 20, 30%, and that happens, did that happen because of what you did? Or did that happen because the economy came back to life? So you have to be able to answer that question, because somebody might ding you on it when you're either trying to sell or market your stuff into the end user community, or you're looking for investment, or you're looking for grants or those other kinds of funding. Now, here's one of my favorite examples. I do a lot of work, and I've done a lot of work around driver safety, right? It's something prior to coming to ODU and running open seas, dealing with transportation type issues. So one of the companies I've worked with has a driver safety program. So I put together a model where I can empirically say, this is what's going to happen. So you see the stuff up there. The things in yellow are things I can, these are variables I can change. The things that are not highlighted are things that are calculated. So I can go into a place and I can say, how many drivers do you have? And what's their average number of miles per driver per year? So I know the total number of road miles driven. The section, the cost, which is really the impacts, okay, what that is that's information that came from US transportation data on the number of fatalities and the number of injuries per 100,000 vehicle miles traveled. So this is empirical data. So, this is the quantitative stuff, gets my physics brain up and going. So I can say for that company per year, if they're driving that many miles, statistically, they're going to have 2.36 fatalities, and they're going to have 198 incidents, 198 injuries. I also know, again, from data, what the average cost of those things is in the United States. So I can say in a typical year, what it's going to cost those folks is that large number you see, around $14 million related to injuries, related to fatalities, related to repairs and things along those lines. So now I want to say is, if I can improve those numbers, if I can reduce the amount of incidents that are occurring, okay, what's the impact? And you see an accident reduction figure there highlighted in 34%. Okay. Where that came from is we ran a bunch of pilot projects with a number of companies, and that's what the average reduction in these incidents was from where they were after implementing the program we were working on. That's, a 34% reduction is what we saw. So what we say is, okay, company I'm dealing with, okay, I can get a 34% reduction. The value of that reduction is about $5 million. The value per driver, for every driver you have out there, it's about $1,000 a year. The cost of this program is $25. All right. Total cost for the company. So what I'm able to do is I'm able to show a return on investment multiplier. So this is one of those quantitative, economically driven models. Now, are there other things that can go in there? Oh yeah, and there's future trend lines of, just things like repair and things along those lines are getting more and more expensive. Fatalities are getting more and more expensive. But it's a good quantitative way of looking at it. And you've got stuff in the environmental field like this too. Okay, so you end up with the question, all right, I've got my quantitative measures. What about this qualitative stuff? Okay, that's important too, particularly when you're talking about a lot of the environmental type things and some of the social things out there. The economic ones can be somewhat cut and dry, but to get at the social stuff and get at the environmental stuff, a lot of it has to do with sort of perception and qualitative type things. Why are they important? Receptivity. Okay, what's the opinion? What's the feeling about people have about the solution you have or the domain you're in? Are they receptive or not receptive? Because if they're not receptive, they're not going to buy or change behaviors. This becomes a predictor of behavior, and like you see in the third bullet. Okay, I love the old statement from psychology, which is behavior is never based upon reality. Behavior is based upon perception. It's how people see stuff. So you can talk till you're blue in the face, but it's the perception of the person that's going to determine how they behave. Okay. Now there's an issue with that kind of stuff. Qualitative measurements carry some risk, and you call it what's the espoused theory, what people say they do versus what they're going to do. So you can think of these things as kind of an indicator. So if I'm talking about, say, solar energy adoption in rural counties, in Virginia, that's kind of an issue. You've got counties that are going, oh my gosh, this is renewable stuff is not a good thing. So you have a negative public opinion about it. So part of a program, and one of the other things I'm working on with the state, is how do you change those perceptions? Because if you don't change those perceptions, the ground's not ready for all the great solar technology, all the alternative energy technology, all those types of things. The ground's not ready for it because people won't allow it. All right. So espouse theory is what people say they do. Theory and use is what they actually do. So get their opinion on something, but then measure and watch the behaviors. Ideally, you use a combination of both. And your value proposition of your business will require some sort of mix of both. Okay. Part of my background's in the training world. What I like is you can actually measure this kind of change. A guy named Kratwall, it's a taxonomy, but it's basically the journey folks get. And you can measure this stuff. So the first thing in the qualitative area is sort of receiving the awareness and toleration of ideas. So, okay, how do you know that? Well, that's espoused. I can do surveys. I can send somebody out into the rural areas and do door-to-doors or that type of stuff saying, are you aware of, say, the benefits of solar energy? Are you aware of a state program to help you do such and such? If it were to come into your area, would you be willing to have a field next to your place? Those are sort of qualitative answers, espoused answers, right? Okay. The next step up, okay, I've received it, I've tolerated the idea. Responding, I take some sort of action based upon those ideas or those things I've gone out. Okay. So now I say yes. I show up at the meeting and I vote or I do whatever, allowing the ordinances to get solar hookups to be going in there. Next stage up is the willingness to be perceived by others as valuing those things. Not only voting yes, but maybe standing up in front of everybody and say, hey, this is a really, really good idea. I think it's of value to the community. On we go. Organization, you make it part of your organizing philosophy, and characterization is they always act in accordance with these now internalized values. So if you think of something like environmental stuff, folks generally fall somewhere on the spectrum here, okay? Characterizations might be the folks who always put the environmental stuff first. It's how they identify, it's how they that's the way they vote, okay? And generally people can back off that a little bit and fall someplace on the spectrum. So if you're going out with a program or you're going out and you're doing discovery, you got to keep this stuff in mind, okay? You're asking those questions, you're finding out people's opinions, you're finding out their receptivity. Because if you go in there and you're doing your interviews and you find they're not tolerating what you're talking about, you come up and say, well, I don't care if you've got an innovative way of hooking into the power grid with your solar cells. I just don't like the stuff. That's an indicator of potential problem. Maybe that's not your market. Maybe you've got to pick a different demographic. You've got to pick a different geographical area, those sorts of things. Okay, validating assumptions. Okay. Your thesis, where you're going to sell into, okay, you've got to validate that there's actual value there. Two ways of doing it. There's sort of a typical research area. You're going into market reports, journals, pubs, sort of the hard published stuff. The internet's a marvelous tool. I have decided not to do a bunch of things based upon research into the internet. You have the brainstorming session. You think it's a really great idea. Then you go to mean old Mr. Google and you find out, oh, they're doing it all over the place. It's not that I couldn't do it at that point in time, but it's not as novel as I thought it would be. So kind of your upfront research. And then the next item is customer and stakeholder discovery. Going out, interviewing, and talking with people who are going to use, buy, and support your solution and the business model you're putting together to execute it. So it's the end customers, but you're also doing discovery to see if the people you think are going to be your partners or suppliers, whether they're even capable or willing to do it and under what conditions, because that's going to impact your business model. So we talked about this last week, but it's always a good review. Why do customer discovery? You see the stuff right up there. The only way to put together a value proposition, the only way to figure out what the perception of value is in your customers and your investors' minds across that economic, environmental, social those spheres is to go out and talk to them. Okay. And the good thing about it, by doing it, it enables you to hone the design of your solution so it has a really good product market fit, which increases your probability that you're going to have a successful business. And being able to define this stuff and talk to this stuff increases the probability that if you're going after a federal grant or award, that you'll actually get that grant. It also provides data into your commercialization plans that are required for both phase 1 and phase 2 of the SBIR program. And again, you see down at the bottom, you're doing it in two different places. Generally, you want to know where your solution fits into their grand scheme of things. And then you want to drill down in at the specific issue or problem sets that your solution is addressing. Keys to good customer discovery, you see right there. That don't lead the witness. All right. You're asking questions. You want to find out what they think. You don't want to kind of sell and bring them around to your way of thinking. You're trying to discover where they are at this point. Later on, when you're selling your stuff into the market, yeah, marketing is trying to get folks to change their mind or take advantage of what they're thinking about already. But in discovery, you're trying to ground truth what they're, what they believe, those things. And you see the keys to it: empathy, dedication, have a plan in the process. And there's a reference down there, pretty good questions for how to develop questions to go out and do this. And put a plan together for yourself. And you see the items there. What don't I know? What don't I understand? What am I making assumptions about? How do I answer those questions? Who do I ask those questions to? And giving yourself some goals and guidelines and a script. Write that. You don't have to ask every question at every interview, but know the points you want to hit across a whole bunch of people so you can get the information you need. So now we'll go into the value of the market. So we've talked about how to determine the notion of value in the client's mind or the investor's mind or those types of stuff. Now let's go a little broader and say, what's the actual value of this particular market we're going after? Why is that important? Well, two things. Is it worth the investment of time, money, and resources? So, your funding sources are going to want to look at this. All right. This is really, really important. Are they going to want to put all this stuff in there and get on the train with you and with their people and their resources and their bandwidth? Okay. That's question number one. Question number two, which is an important one from a quality of life standpoint, is it worth your time? If you're watching this, you're thinking about entrepreneurship, you're thinking about innovation, you're thinking about commercialization, you want to go out, you want to go through the long, hard drill of putting together an application and applying for a grant or whatever, that all takes time. And it's time you're spending doing that versus doing something else. So the question is it worth your time? That is just as critical. Okay. Is it bringing value back to you? Think of your internal value proposition. I do it because it's fun, maybe. I do it because I make money at it. I do it because I like solving important problems. If it's hitting none of those, it's just going to be a miserable slog to go through. So ask the question, is it worth your time? So how to look at market size and value. Okay. Typically, you see this market size expressed in three different ways. Something called the total addressable market, a service addressable market, and your target market. If you think of the big circle there, that's the entire universe of potential customers who could possibly use this thing. And, it could be regional, it could be the United States, it could be the world, it could be our whole giant set, okay? The serviceable addressable market is, okay, I can't reach the entire world, nor do I have the production capability to reach the entire world. So realistically, what's the market that I can get out to? How big is that market? All right. And then the last thing is, okay, within that set of people, okay, what's the target market? Within my serviceable market, who's going to be most likely to buy? Within that target market, Who does my value proposition resonate, and get them to shift from what they're doing now about the issue, which might include doing nothing, to switching over and using my solution and bringing it on board and paying for it and all that other kind of stuff. Okay. Those are the people that I think I can get to. All right. And remember, you see down at the bottom, you're only going to convert part of your target market. So, ways to look at market sizing, okay, especially for the total addressable and service addressable, historical, current, and predicted markets. So, for example, the current market for solar panels in the world is X, and it's projected to be Y at some particular point in time. So, oh wow, if I'm a solar panel manufacturer, I figured a new way of doing it, a new technology, that can be my total addressable market, and some smaller section of that based upon where I can get to, and service is going to be my serviceable addressable market. So I'm driving those that way. And then the other thing is, which I like, which is the differential value, which is the value to be created, i.e. I'm creating value for that customer, and some portion of that value I am going to be able to harvest and bring back to myself to keep my business up and going. And this is a real driver of the target market, okay? And an innovation-based entrepreneurship, which most of the folks watching this are dealing with, when you're coming up with something new and innovative to the marketplace that's going to have a impact in the economic, the social, or the environmental world, okay? The differential value you create drives your target market. If you're not creating anything new, say like t-shirts, I'm just rebranding them in a certain way, that's marketing. That's an entire different type of entrepreneurship. This is innovation-based entrepreneurship. So a way of looking at this, the current market spends X number of dollars per year on solar panels. My solution saves them Y. That's going to create Z dollars of value that can be shared, i.e. some of it's going to go to the customer because they're not going to give you everything they save, but some of it comes back to you, and that's really the money that's going to drive your business, because that's going to get people to change, and it's going to be the things that you need to deliver against such that you can make a profit. So for example, and this can also be looked at from not only the economic side, but also the kind of the social side or the environmental side. So for example, currently X% of the population is unwilling to allow renewable energy in their location. My solution will change that to Y. Okay. There's a difference there that your solution's going to attack. Okay. Rough market sizing. Again, we talked about this. Your solution is paid for because of the value you create. That value needs to be compelling. And remember, you're not the one who decides compelling, okay? And compelling's different for different markets. I always use the example, supermarkets. Supermarkets are low margin businesses. If you can come in there and shave a couple of percentage points off something, they like that. If I go up to an airline, I know from having worked with airlines before, that if you can show a 10% return on investment on a particular thing, they will switch over to doing something different. Other markets are bigger. So what's compelling for that market? And how do you discover that? How do you find that out? You go out and you do customer discovery. Those are the types of questions you work. How much of a change would you need to see before you'll shift from what you're doing right now? That's a totally legitimate discovery question. Okay. Value should be quantifiable. Generally, a lot of times it comes down to money, reductions in costs and increases in revenue, but not always. And the examples here are like, think Whole Foods. Is Whole Foods the cheapest food out there? No. Okay. They're pushing sort of lifestyle stuff. They're pushing a notion that maybe their quality is better, though that's, depending on where you are, that could be, debatable. But they've done really, really good marketing. So it's not coming down to money if I go shop there. Environmental drivers in the European Union, working with some companies over there, when you're going and leading with a value proposition to people, a lot of times you lead with the environmental and social, because that drives business over there. That hasn't been the case so much in the United States, but that's changing. We talked about the Target example and Walmart example earlier. There's a lot of consumer behaviors that are driving environmental behaviors in US companies right now, which is a good thing. Doesn't always come down to the dollars, but if you think about it, it kind of does, because Target's going, if I don't show our customers that we care about this stuff and we do it in such and such a way, those customers are going to buy from somebody else who says they do care about it. So everything still comes around to money. You got to pay for stuff at the end of the day. So what you do may result in environmental benefits. It also might end up with social benefits and change. So I like to call these things the golden targets. One of the other of these things, and this is just the way you express it, but it all comes down to the same thing. I've got a solution that has a solid economic value, but guess what? It also produces demonstrable environmental and social value. Or if I'm with a different customer, hey, I've got solid environmental value, hey, but it also produces social and economic. Or the third one. So I think you get the picture here. What you want to be able to do is, when you're going into somebody, just present the case that, and depending on who you're talking to in the company, if I'm talking to the environmental compliance person in the company, yeah, they care about the environmental and health, safety, and environmental type issues, right? So I got them on board, but sitting right next to him is the chief financial officer. I want to be able to turn from one to the other and say, hey, we're doing all this great stuff, but hey, Mr. Chief Financial Officer, if you do it this way, you're also cutting 20% off your costs. Why wouldn't you do that? That's a pretty compelling argument. So these are you want to hit all three, okay? But you always need the economic one in there, because at the end of the day, you got to figure out how stuff gets paid for. Okay, so kind of the general pattern. What value am I creating for a client? What's my scaling unit? And how do I justify or validate that? What I like to do is I model it for a single client, kind of like I did with the driver safety thing. And then I can do it for a market. Okay, if I do it for this one company, how many like companies are out there? Or how many like installations or like communities or like consumers? And model the whole thing. I can get pretty good on this. Okay. Projecting your revenues is another thing to look at. And here's a way of looking at that TAM, that SAM, and target market. Pencils, all right? Customer segments, how many are there? What are they spending on the problem and issue currently? There's 14 billion pencils manufactured every year. At 10%, 10 cents per pencil, that's a $1.4 billion market. With a 4.6 billion person population and 3 pencils per person. All right. And I have no clue whether or not any of this is true. This is an example, right? Some of it is. The serviceable addressable market. How much of that total addressable market can I actually tap? Well, I'm a small business in Norfolk, Virginia, in the southeastern part of Virginia. I can sell it through my shop on Granby Street, which is downtown, or I can sell it through Amazon. If I sell it through my Granby Street shop, Norfolk's population is 250,000. I probably the opportunities to sell 750K pencils. So the value, the serviceable addressable market there is $75,000. If I sell through Amazon, there's 100 million Prime members in the US that represents 300 million pencils. The SAM for that is $30 million. That's interesting. So if I look at target markets, okay, that's going to depend on my value proposition, right? So if I say, all right, my pencil never breaks and never needs refilling, probably 50% of people who buy pencils would find that to be a very compelling value proposition. Okay, so in Norfolk, if I'm capturing 50% of that, that SAM, that serviceable addressable market, that's $37.5 thousand. Okay, and if I capture that, it represents 15 In Norfolk, it's 37.5K. If it's in the US, i.e. Amazon, it's 15 million. If my pencil writes in changing colors, I'm writing and it changes as I'm going along, maybe 2% of the population might be interested in that. In Norfolk, it's 1.5K is my target market if I achieve that. In the US, it's 6 million. So from a business standpoint, you look at these things and you say, my goodness, where do I want to be? And when I look at these numbers, I can tell you my shop on Granby is not very, very appealing. The Amazon stuff looks better to me. So you do these kind of analyses. How to make things better for my target market, for my serviceable addressable market, or I can change my total addressable market. And here's examples. So total addressable market, the way of expanding that is I add customer segments. So maybe instead of just talking the US, I now talk the world, or I talk the US and South America, right? If I'm only in a region of the US with my environmental solution, maybe I say, I'm going to include the entire US. So you expand that total addressable market that you're going after. Serviceable addressable market, how do I expand that? That's really how you can get to people, all right? So that's adding channels. Okay, maybe I pick up some distributors. Maybe I do something along those lines. And target market, how much of that market you can capture. Two ways of doing it. You're either improving the value proposition, so it's more compelling and you get those numbers up, or you're improving your marketing, which is fine too. Okay, I got to get the word out there better. I've got to be seen as something or other, and maybe I add a social value proposition in there, or my pencils are the really, really cool ones. So different ways of changing around on those. All right, that's today's session. The next session we're going to do is we're going to talk about outreach to industry and various stakeholders. So how do you get out there? Particularly some of these items you're doing, you're looking for letters of support if you're going after an SBIR or some other government kind of grant. You're looking for folks who indicate that they'd be a first adopter. That's really important if you're looking for investors and things along those lines. And various stakeholders. How do you get people in on your team or in as clients to make your dream go forward? So that's next week's session. And like I said, at the end of this thing, assistance and resources, these pages, this was put together for the DOE's Release 2 for their SBIR STTR program for 2024. That's where this information is located. Something I might point out, they've got the solar energy office and the water power office have some pretty good webinars and slides there, which can let you know what they're looking for. DOE's got an excellent tutorial site that will help you through the nuts and bolts of SBIR submission. PAMS is the website all of this needs to be submitted through. If a letter of intent, but we're past that point at this point with this particular Release 2. Not required for a submission, but they ask for it just to give you some feedback up early. There's market studies for at the Department of Energy for the various things you're looking at, and something called the Clean Energy Business Network. They're a power connector also, and they're maintaining a list of everything going on with power connectors supporting this particular SBIR opportunity. So go to their site. Lots of resources there. I've got colleagues who are doing similar things. Everybody has a little different bent on it. That's of use. I'd recommend doing that. TABA, Technical and Business Assistance for the SBIR STTR program. The government will add extra money to your award as opposed to taking money away to get support of folks like me and other folks who can help you with commercialization or even maybe some of the technical stuff. Information on that's located there. These are the seminars and series we're running related to this particular opportunity. The links are there to sign up, just like you signed up for this one. And finally, from a business development standpoint, business opportunity development standpoint, these are some of the gurus. Alex Osterwalder with the Business Model Canvas, Eric Reese with the whole Lean Startup, which is a lot of our work is based around that. Great YouTube series on putting together business model canvases from a company called Strategizer. That's the link for that there. Steve Blank is the guru, considered the guru on customer discovery. There's information at his site. And for OpenSeas, you see my name there. You see Steve Goad's name there. We're available to help. We also have one-on-one office hours. So consider this an overview. And as you get down and you chew into it, and you want some feedback and you want some advice, sign up for one of those. And on that note, thank you very much. Have a great day. Have fun innovating, and the best of luck in taking those innovations and bringing them into commercial life. Thanks.